The transfer portal is opening up today. Oregon could add a safety. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get yourselves started. We'll talk coaching staff. We'll talk linebackers a little bit later on as well. And not great transfer portal news for Oregon basketball. That's coming up on today's show. Let's start with where Oregon could start in the transfer portal. So this is expected to be a big, crazy window. Josh Pate has talked about this on his show that, he thinks it's going to be the craziest window we've ever seen. And my take is, no, it's going to be the craziest spring window, potentially, we have ever seen, with the number of starting caliber players that, are going to be willing to transfer, because there's no limit. There's no restriction right now. The court said, nope, you can't tell kids how many times they can transfer, so you can leave at any point in time. And the transfer portal window opens from April 16th to April 30th. And I don't think Oregon has very many needs, if any. I think you look at where Oregon's roster is at, it's one of the 10 best in college football. It's one of the 2 or 3 best in the Big Ten. It's probably number 2. You could even make the argument it's number 1. But safety is the number 1 position that I look at and say, all right, I could see Oregon adding a transfer here. Now, the willingness or desire of the coaching staff to add a safety in the transfer portal depends on a couple of factors. Number 1, whether or not they plan on switching any corners from that group to a safety role, because there are a lot of corners. There are just a lot of corners. And we've seen Triquez Bridges before go from safety to corner in the recent history. We've seen Brian Addison go from receiver to safety before. Charles Nelson played both sides of the ball. Jamal Hill went from safety to linebacker. Position changes are not unheard of. And so that's the first thing that I look at as to whether I think the staff will go to the transfer portal and say, okay, we need to add somebody here. The second thing is how they feel about young, unproven players. You've got a trio of 4-star freshmen or redshirt freshman safeties who were all blue chip recruits. Now, that doesn't inherently mean that they're ready to step in and contribute right away, but we also don't know, because we haven't really seen a lot from Tyler Turner and Cody DeCamara, who were in the class of 2023. Aaron Flowers has made a lot of noise in the 2024 cycle. Is a true freshman going to come in and play at safety? I mean, Caleb Downs did last year over at Alabama. That's also at Alabama. So, and Downs, who is now at Ohio State, of course, is just an outstandingly talented player. So too is Flowers, but he's not expected to be on Caleb Downs' level, because few guys really are. So those are the 2 factors that I look at, and what I think the coaching staff has to look at to determine whether or not they want to bring in a guy at that safety position. Because right now, let's go back to 2023 first. So we got a baseline understanding of how many bodies are needed at the position. And I will also point out here, knock on this. This is we'll call this a wood desk. I'm knocking on wood. Oregon didn't have to endure injuries at the safety position a year ago. They had injuries at corner. They didn't actually have any injuries at safety. So it was a very healthy unit last year. So I think that limited the number of guys you might otherwise have seen in a normal year, where a guy, misses half a game, or maybe gets ruled out because of targeting, which is a dumb rule, but whatever, or, guy misses a game or 2. Last year, you had 3 guys log the most snaps at the safety position: Evan Williams, Steve Stevens, Tysheem Johnson. You also had over 100 snaps each for Cole Martin and Brian Addison. Now, I put Martin in the safety category because I look at that nickel spot, and yeah, you can put a corner as the 5th defensive back on the field. Most often it's going to be a safety. So that's the way that I'm approaching this examination of the safety position. So as you look at the safety room right now, you've got Kobe Savage, who was an all Big 12 performer at Kansas State. He figures to be a guy that plays over the top. That's probably Oregon's starting free safety. At least when you look at the other guys that are in the room, I think that's where he fits in. So Savage is going to be one starter. That's the expectation. Brandon Johnson, the nickel transfer from Duke, probably a guy you bring in, two-time all honorable mention ACC selection, also to be a starting player. And then Tysheem Johnson is back. Now, what I wonder about and why I could see Oregon working in a transfer is Tysheem Johnson was not superb in coverage last year. He kind of like Bennett Williams wasn't great over the top, but is really, really good in the box, and so plays that nickel position mostly pretty well. Tysheem plays all over the place, but he plays down close to the line of scrimmage when he's at his best, right? Covering guys in the box, making plays in the run game, blitzing every now and then. I think he had a sack or two last year. I know he had at least one of Tyler Shuck against Texas Tech a season ago. So if you're talking about guys to play over the top on the defense, that's where either an Aaron Flowers, Cody DeCamber, or Tyler Turner could work their way into the rotation, or you could see a transfer. That's where Oregon safeties are at, and why I think a guy that, is rangy, has got a lot of, Verone McKinley, John Boyette sort of vibes, just someone who's a true rover on the back end. I think the word on Kobe Savage is that, he can do that sort of stuff, but it's not necessarily his greatest strength as a safety, but certainly he's a good football player, and you expect him to be able to go over the top there. I think losing Steve Stevens and Evan Williams, who, both did some really nice things, Evan Williams especially, he was second team all Pac-12 this past year. That wasn't necessarily for the work he did over the top. That was because he was a great blitzer. He came up and made plays in the run. And Oregon hasn't had, over the last couple of years, for whatever reason, a great playmaking safety over the top. Verone McKinley is the last one. So if you approach the transfer portal and you're this Oregon coaching staff and you say, I feel like there is a guy who can make plays over the top the way that somebody else can't, and we're not going to shift somebody positionally to, be able to make that sort of play. I've talked with Brian Smith on this show in the past about Sione Laulea. He thinks that's a guy who at 6'3", number one JUCO cornerback prospect in the 2024 cycle, could maybe go and play over the top. If he makes that jump, well then great. And Oregon's got that sort of guy, and then you can alternate between Tysheem Johnson and Brandon Johnson at the nickel spot there. But I think that's why safety can be a spot where Oregon is looking, and I think it's the position where you have the greatest potential need. Now, it's not an automatic need. This is not inherently a glaring weakness because we don't really know what to make of Oregon safety, like that second safety spot, right? If Tysheem's playing a lot of nickel, maybe they move him over the top a little bit more. But if Savage is one safety and Tysheem's the other and Johnson's down at the nickel spot, well, what about when Johnson comes out? Who comes in at nickels? Does Tysheem slide down? Does somebody slide up? I don't know. I don't know how they plan to handle that sort of stuff. But I also think about this in the context of, what happens if one of these guys gets hurt? Like if those are your three starting safeties, what if one of them goes down? Who's going to be the guy to step in? Is it Flowers? Is it Turner? Is it DeCamber? Don't know. So a transfer who at the very least has got some experience and could be a depth piece could work in there. But certainly if it's going to be as crazy as everyone says, and you can go in there and get a high-end caliber starter, yeah, I don't think that Oregon has a safety right now who I feel is completely unbeatable on the depth chart with regards to playmaking ability over the top of a defense. So that's where I feel like Oregon could go out and get a safety in this transfer portal cycle. I don't think there are too many other glaring needs. There's a sneaky one, though. There's a sneaky one out there. Can't sleep on linebacker, and I'll tell you why. I'll also tell you why you should check out FanDuel. Yeah, that's right, because it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing. My Mariners actually won today. I was watching before I came over here to record. That puts me in a much better mood. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Guaranteed. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. $150 whether you win or lose. You don't even have to be right. You just have to be there. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. So I've been told from time to time, most of my life, I'm a competitive person. If you think that's true, you're right. You're 100% right. Well, I have a competitive side. We all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. I yearn for the day where Locked On Ducks has got over 150 million downloads. We'll get there together, one download at a time. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part is messing with your friends. You can do that. You can play with your friends as well, whatever you want, and earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Speaking of free, good thing second segment sips are free or I'd be broke. All right, before I get to a mailbag question, wanted to talk a little bit about the linebackers because this is, I think, an overlooked aspect of Oregon's defense that has a legitimate question, where you could see Jerry Mixon from last year's class work his way into the rotation. He, appears like Amari Washington, defensive tackle, to be the guy that they liked based on where he stood on the depth chart last year the most from that 2023 class. Maybe he's the fourth linebacker. Maybe you get a true freshman in there. I've talked about Braden Platt recently on this show. You've got Kamar Mathuti and Dylan Williams in there as well. These guys are all talented recruits. Now, making a jump to the college level as a true freshman is pretty hard. We've seen Noah Sewell and Justin Flo do it. Those were both five-star recruits. But it's not as if it is impossible. So I think that linebacker could be a spot where Oregon looks and says, maybe we need to add somebody there. The two guys at the top, I feel really good about. Jeffrey Bassa, all Pac-12 performer. Justin Jacobs, I think when he gets a full season to really, get his feet under him, he's battling injuries over the first half of last year. And that was forcing, Jamal Hill to play a bigger role and Bryce Betcher to have some significant snaps in there for the Ducks on defense. I think when Justin Jacobs comes in healthy, with spring ball and fall camp and, is able to ramp up during the FCS game against Idaho and everything like that, I think he can be an all-conference caliber linebacker. He just has those sorts of physical traits, but we really didn't see it last year. You saw a moment here or there, but he wasn't a high-impact player consistently, I think because he didn't have a full season really to play. So I feel good about those two guys. Your number 3 linebacker, in all likelihood, Devin Jackson, redshirt sophomore, class of 2022 recruit, one of the few holdovers from the previous coaching staff. There really aren't that many left. Like Terrence Ferguson is one, Patrick Herbert would be one, Devin Jackson is one, Dante Manning is one. That's kind of it. that's kind of it. It's frankly amazing at this point with all the turnover that there are any guys left after this past year, but there's still a couple. But, Jackson, snap count wise, was the number 5 linebacker for Oregon last year, but no more Jamal Hill in that room. So you got to replace that spot. And then I don't know what Bryce Betcher's plans are and whether or not he's someone that you can or want to consistently rely on. Like, he's such an awesome guy. He's the best defensive center fielder in all of college baseball. But is he someone who you want to be rolling out there as a starting linebacker? Probably not. He's a little undersized. He doesn't have, high-end physical traits. He's good enough. He's big enough. He's fast enough. But is he ever going to be an all-conference caliber player? Does he have that sort of upside? No, I don't think that he does. So you saw 5 linebackers play meaningful snaps for the Ducks last year. Well, right, that was Jeff Bassa, Justin Jacobs, Jamal Hill, Bryce Betcher, Devin Jackson. Maybe Connor Soley, the Arizona State transfer, who was mostly a special teams guy last year, maybe he works his way into the fold, but that's another spot where if you get a starting caliber or, a depth piece guy to kind of pair with Devin Jackson as that second lineup of linebackers, I could see that happening for sure. So those are the transfer portal thoughts I've got as the portal opens today. We'll see who, ends up going into the portal and talk about everything that means and whatnot, because Ducks are going to hit the portal. That's just the reality here, and we'll certainly talk about all of them here on the show. Let's get to the mailbag. YouTube comments, mailbag very open, by the way, because it's always open. YouTube comments or X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or at Locked On Ducks. DMs and mentions wide open. If you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, go join the flock over at Subtext. Link in the description below wherever you listen to or watch this show. This question from Caleb. I appreciate your show, Spencer. I appreciate you, Caleb. And if you're listening on podcasts, I threw up deuces for you because why not? Really should be this, right? Mariota flying Hawaiian. Okay, anyway. Who do you believe will be the next assistant coach to be poached, hopefully after this coming season? Yeah, I think the coaching carousel for Oregon is done this cycle. Carlos Lachlan leaving was a little bit of a surprise. I think, once again, Dan Lanning did a really good job hiring Rashad Samples from Arizona State. His track record, as I talked about last week on the show, really, really strong. And I like what he brings to the table, especially from a recruiting standpoint. But I think the answer to this question is Chris Hampton. So Hampton was the defensive coordinator at Tulane. They went and won the Cotton Bowl against USC. Probably the best season, at least in recent history, for Tulane football. Has put them on the map in a significant way. That's, of course, where our old friend Ty Thompson is. I can't wait to watch him get a chance to start, and I hope he thrives this year with the Green Wave. And Troy Summerall, who is their head coach, coming over now from Troy after Willie Fritz went to Houston from Tulane because, coaching carousel and such. Anyway, I digress. The reason I think this answers Chris Hampton is twofold. Number one, this will be his second season with the Ducks. And you saw with Carlos Lachlan, putting in 2 years, I think gives you a certain amount of credibility and allows you to put together a body of work that can impress someone else so that you can bring them a resume that showcases, oh, okay, this guy's good enough for this role. We would want him there. Number two, if Oregon has another great defense, any guy who's a co-defensive coordinator is going to get looks. And Tosh Lupoy has not been tied to any sort of other defensive coordinator opening or head coach opening or anything like that. So I'm not worried about Lupoy leaving. He came back down to college from the NFL to be a defensive coordinator with Dan Lanning. I don't think he would use that as an opportunity to bounce. I mean, there are plenty of ambitious guys. We're well aware of that at this point, I hope. But Hampton is the guy who I think goes next. And I think Stein is the number 2 pick here. But Hampton, there was a report this offseason that he turned down multiple Power 5 defensive coordinator jobs to stay with Oregon this year, which is a testament to a couple things. Number one, how big his role actually is on this defensive staff. Guy is very good. He is very, very good. He came in after the first season when the defense was a disappointment. And last year, aside from Washington, it was great. There's just no other way to look at Oregon's defense last year. They played great outside of the Washington games, and you put a first-round NFL quarterback with 3 NFL receivers, it turns out that offense is pretty tough to stop. So I think that's one part of it. And then the second part of it is Hampton is, on that upward trajectory, right? So he went from Tulane to Oregon. He's a co-DC. If he's already had those sorts of offers, I think he really likes what Oregon is bringing to the table, and he knows what the Ducks can accomplish this year, and that'll boost his profile even more. Because certainly Oregon making the Pac-12 title game and Bo Nix knocking on the door of a Heisman and everything like that, that certainly turns a lot of heads. But you know what gets people's attention even more is if Oregon is in the playoff, which they should be. That is my barometer for success for Oregon in 2024. You got to make a 12-team playoff. They're minus 210 according to our friends at FanDuel. They should make it. And if they don't, disappointing, letdown season. So if Oregon's in the playoff and they win a game or two and Chris Hampton's a co-defensive coordinator, who's going to want to pick him up then? I mean, you could be talking head coaching opportunity at that point. And I don't know that, I can guarantee that'll be the case, but certainly his name will be a lot hotter. It'll be a very hot commodity if Oregon has the sort of season that they're capable of. And I think that, 2 years with the Ducks is about the amount of time you need to put together a body of work. that allows you to be a candidate to go elsewhere and, the upward trajectory, right? I think Stein would be second. I think Rashad Samples would be third because I think Samples would be with the Ducks at least the next couple of years. But Stein would also be more established than Samples. So if Stein gets hired as a head coach, does Samples become the OC? Don't know. We'll, of course, cross that bridge if and probably when we come to it. But yeah, I think Hampton is the answer for the next assistant that Oregon is going to have to replace. I would love for him to all just stay together, but that's not reality. But for 2024, I don't expect him to be going anywhere, and I'm glad to have Coach Hampton back because I think he's really good. I think this Oregon defensive staff is really, really excellent. Great question, though. Oregon men's basketball did not get the transfer portal news they wanted the other day. You can get the hiring news you want over at LinkedIn, though, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, which is like a super cool price. LinkedIn isn't just a job board, folks. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. It's why 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for hiring. You should too. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So not the greatest transfer portal season so far for Oregon men's basketball. And I'm not in panic concern mode. I am in what's the plan mode. That's where my head is at. Just kind of a what's going to happen next, and is it going to be good? Because this was a great option and it's been taken off the table. In fact, not one, but two transfer portal options appear to be taken off the table. So Tony Perkins commits to Missouri. He was the second team All Big 12 guard from Iowa, who I talked about here on the show. Guy just gave you Jermaine Couisnard vibes. I mean, if you're in the Big Ten, you probably play defense. Admittedly, I didn't get to the point of watching film on him, but statistically, very similar. He can score. He's got a playmaking component to his game with the assists. He's an okay shooter, but could maybe improve, as Couisnard did going from South Carolina to Oregon. He's going to Missouri. So that's no longer an option. And as Oregon looks ahead to next season, there is still no starting shooting guard in the rotation. I think Des Lindsey, who's a 6'6" shooting guard / small forward coming over from the junior college ranks. Yeah, I think he's solid, brings some nice things to the table. I think he's closer to a Cario Oquendo, Brennan Rigsby sort of role than he would be a Jermaine Couisnard sort of role. So with Perkins off to Missouri, that leaves that option open. Now, still, the transfer portal is not completely bare. I haven't seen or heard anything about who Oregon could be after next, but with Tony Stubblefield coming back to the Ducks coaching staff after giving it a go as the head coach at DePaul, which is a very, very tough situation, I speculated on last week's show that could mean there are transfer portal announcements imminent. There better be. I was hoping it'd be Perkins. Perkins would have been absolutely perfect for what Oregon is looking for next year, but that's no longer an option. Then, this has not formally happened yet, but Oumar Ballo, who is, I believe, the top-rated player in the transfer portal, who has played against Dana Altman many a times, and N'Faly Dante over the last couple of seasons, he's been crystal balled to Indiana. Now, is a crystal ball everything? No, but are crystal balls logged for a reason? Not also yes, just yes, because the first answer was no, Spencer. The second answer is yes, so saying also would be incorrect. Just had to remind myself of that. Anyway, thank you for putting up with my idiocy from time to time. So Oumar Ballo is crystal ball to Indiana. That would be a massive flip. And Ballo would be, I cannot express this in the strongest possible terms, perfect. He would be perfect. He would be new Dante. he'd be new Dante. We know Dana loved Dante, and he had an incredible end to Oregon's season in his career. And unfortunately, Ducks couldn't get it done against Creighton, or else. I got to tell you, I was watching the March Madness, of course, because it's the best, and NC State making that run to the Final Four, and I watched that thinking, that could have been Oregon. That could have been Oregon. If they'd met Purdue in the Elite Eight, guess what? N'Faly Dante to stop Zach Edey, hey, he'd have as good a chance as anybody. Anyway, I try to think about that stuff. Like Kuznard was so hot, and Shellstad was, playing solidly, and it was really good. Anyway, so Ballo's crystal ball to Indiana, which means that Oregon is looking for a starting big, or at least a starting caliber big, because the Nate Biddle situation is one in which if he is healthy over the course of an entire year, that guy could average 15, 8, and 2 blocks a game, shoot at 33% from beyond the arc. Crazy amount of talent. But for someone who's battled injuries each of his first couple years, and that's been the history with Oregon bigs over the last several seasons, can you expect that? Can you demand that? Can his body take that? I have my doubts. Like, that would be a potentially fruitful situation, but it'd be a risky proposition to say, well, we're relying on Nate Biddle to stay healthy all year to have, a plus at the center position. Well, I don't know. Like, Oregon has to find another option in there. And if it's not going to be Oumar Ballo, then they got to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, and I'm not sure how seriously they're actually looking at Ballo. I know that, Perkins had Oregon listed in his top 6, but I would be more than a little surprised. I'd be disappointed, frankly, if Dana Altman didn't see Ballo's name go into the portal and try to make contact with him right away. I'd be more than a little shocked if that didn't happen, or if Dana Altman or any other member of the staff, somebody from Oregon, just given the familiarity and proximity there, because he was at Gonzaga to start his career, then went to Arizona, and he's got just the 1 year left. And certainly I'd take him for a 1-year rental, because he's a really, really good player and could help Oregon make an NCAA tournament run. So those were the dream options. I never, when I talked about them in the same show, expected that Oregon would be able to get both. I was hoping they'd be able to land at least one, but one is definitely off the table in Perkins. Ballo is likely off the table. I don't know why he thinks Indiana is the best spot to go, but hey, there are a lot of factors that go into a kid committing out of the transfer portal. So Oregon is back to Ibrahima Traore, who could certainly be a backup 4 or 5 this year. He's got a little, I compared him to J.J. Hickson. He's got a Frank Kepnong to his game. That's a recent Oregon player that I think his game reminds me of a lot. Not incredibly refined at the offensive end, but certainly capable. But just, 6'8", 6'9", athletic, defense, energy, block shots, and dunks. That's not a guy that you ever complain about being able to bring off the bench, but it's certainly not someone who I expect to come to Oregon and start right away. And I don't think that the Ducks do either. So, if they're going to roll, like the other option, if they can't find a big, and I would certainly hope they do, is KJ Evans. You hope Biddle is healthy, and then when he's not, you play KJ Evans at the small ball 5. Now, when that happened last year, and Dante went out, and Biddle was out, and Evans had to play the small ball 5, he was very good. He was very good at both ends of the floor. But one name to keep an eye on, he's still in the transfer portal, is Andrei Stojakovic, the son of NBA great Peja Stojakovic, who had a career with the Kings and then the Hornets, and I remember growing up watching him as a kid. Stojakovic was about an 8-point-a-game scorer, but a good shooter, about 33-ish% a season ago with Stanford. 6'7" shooting guard. I don't know if he's someone Oregon would automatically insert into the starting lineup. I think it's just a name to watch for, to have as an option to put in the starting lineup. And maybe that, 2-guard position rotates between Keyshawn Bartholomew and Des Lindsey, who's coming in, but there's no Oquendo, there's no Rigsby coming off the bench. But you'll have Des Lindsey, you'll have, one of Bam Tracy or Mookie Cook, you'll have Keyshawn Bartholomew, and you'll have Traore as well. I think you get one more big into the mix, and you find a starting 2, and then you're good. But those top 2 options both appear to be off the table. And I'll close with some optimism here. as it pertains to Oregon basketball and the transfer portal. When the season ended, someone asked KJ Evans, like right after the loss to Creighton, which was, of course, devastating, what his plans were for next year, and he said he didn't know. He said, I don't know what I'm going to do or anything like that. I think he was more just distraught about the loss. I am 70% gut feeling here that no news is good news on that front. I have not heard a peep. I talked at the time about how Evans would be best served to come back to Dana Altman, and Oregon would be best served to get KJ Evans back because he needs to take a jump from freshman year to sophomore year. And if he and Shellstad both do that, those are all conference caliber players. Those guys are absolute rock stars. And so if you keep Evans around, and that's the way it feels, is there's been no buzz, there have been no crystal balls, there have been no articles, no speculation, no Twitter rumors, nothing about KJ Evans for the last couple weeks. And he said he'd know in the last couple weeks. He hasn't made an affirmative decision that he's returning to the Ducks, but the fact that there's been no buzz since that quote got out there, I think is a good sign. So if you can have Evans back and you've got Tracy and Cook rotating at the 3, you find someone to play at the 2. And, I might have to explore this on another show. Maybe Tracy and Cook both start, and you just have a couple of guys out there who are 6'5" or 6'6". Maybe Mookie Cook is ready for that. I don't know. That'd be asking a lot since he didn't really get a freshman season. But that's where things stand for Oregon basketball in the portal. I look forward to that announcement. I feel like it's got to be coming soon. Move has got to be made. Scholarships are open, and there are needs on this team. Just got to pull the trigger on somebody. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.